Hey everyone, just trying this for my second time. So today we're going to be learning about the distributive property. Please make sure you have the note out in front of you that matches what you have out that I have up on the screen and follow along. I'm sorry I'm doing it this way, but it's a pretty straightforward way for me to do things. The distributive property can be summarized mathematically by the overall summary as shown at the top of your sheet. When you apply the distributive property, you're getting rid of brackets. So you can see I've got brackets right here. So there's what's inside the brackets. And you're taking the term outside or in front of the brackets. So that'd be the A right here. And you're multiplying everything inside the brackets by the term out front of the brackets. We've kind of already done this a little bit. To show you an example, I have an example down here. So you can see you've got 5. Let me just get a different, there we go. So you can see an example down here, and I'll just zoom in on the example. So you can see right here, there's our example. And you got 5 out in front of the brackets, touching the brackets. So you know that means multiply. So what we're going to do, so I'll just clean that up a bit, is we're going to take 5 and we're going to multiply by what's inside the brackets using what we learned yesterday. And we know 5 times 4 gets us to 20. And we add on the x to get 20x. And then we do it again. And we go 5 times positive 2. Oops, sorry. 5 times positive 2 to get us to positive 10. And because 20x and positive 10 are not like terms, we stop right there and you don't simplify any further. So in a nutshell, that's really the summary of what the distributive property is. So I'll show you a couple different examples, and we'll start out with expand and simplify the following. So expanding means to take what's outside the brackets and multiply it by what's inside the brackets. And then simplify means if there's any like terms, collect them and simplify. So I'll drop down my equal sign and I think to myself, okay, what is 2 times 5? Because the 2 is touching the brackets. I know 2 times 5 is 10. And I do not forget about my x right there. And so I would then add on my x. I then follow up with 2 times positive 3. I'm multiplying still. And 2 times positive 3 gets me to positive 6. I then think to myself, is there anything I can simplify or collect? And there's nothing I can see here that I can simplify or collect. All right, so what we'll do now is we'll just move over to the next one. This one's a little bit tricky because you've got the negative 2 out in front. So pay attention carefully and you have to be aware of what's kind of out in front and what all goes with it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do negative 2 times positive 7. So in my head, I think what's a positive times a negative, and it's a negative. And I know 2 times 7 is 14. I then don't forget about your variable. So I add on my x, or I include my x, so negative 14x. I then repeat, and I go negative 2 times negative 4. Remember, the whole term is that negative 4 right there. So negative 2 times negative 4. A negative times a negative is a positive, and 2 times 4 is 8. I then think to myself, is there anything that I can collect or simplify here? And there's nothing I can collect or simplify. So that's a good start. I'm just going to go to the next page or the next example. If that was too fast, don't forget you can pause and take a minute to catch up, but make sure you're getting these examples down. All right, so a trickier one. We can use a distributive property on a trinomial because there's 1, 2, 3 terms that we're dealing with. So we're going to use the distributive property with a trinomial. We'll be distributing negative 3 inside our brackets. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do negative 3 times 2x squared. So again, I drop my equal signs down. I know that a negative times a positive makes a negative. I know that 3 times 2 makes 6. And then I add on my x squared. I then do the next term. I'm doing negative 3 times negative 5x. So I know that a negative times a negative is a positive. I know that 3 times 5 is 15. And there's no variable on 3, so I can just add on my variable of x. Finally, I'm going to do the last. And remember, when you are distributing, you have to distribute to everything inside the brackets. It's It's that simple. So I start out by thinking, what's a negative times a positive? Because you've got the negative times a positive, and a negative times a positive is a negative. I then do 3 times 4, and 3 times 4 is 12. I have distributed as far as I can go. I take a second and I review my work, and I do not see anything that I can simplify because they are all different terms. They are not like terms. So that's an x squared. That's just an x, and there's no variable there, so they are not like terms. All right, well, let's get over to the next example. Oops, I didn't want that. Let me just get rid of that line. I wonder if I can get rid of that line. All right, perfect. So now we'll do a tricky one. This one's going to be full level difficulty. So I'll drop down my equal sign. Let's deal with 2 and 6m. All right, well, what's 2 times 6? Because I'm going to start with the 2 and the 6. So I'm going to do 2 times 6 first, which is 12. I'm not going to forget about my m. I then am going to deal with my 2 times negative 3. Do not forget, that's all one term right there. So I do 2 times negative 3. Positive 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Awesome. Next step. This is what's outside my brackets. It's the positive and the 3, or the plus 3. So I'm going to distribute that inside. So I'm going to do positive 3 times 16. And sadly, this is where I have not come organized. I should have brought my calculator with me. Times 3, 8. That's 48. Okay, good. I was just checking in my head real quick. I just get nervous when I'm not very sure. Okay, so let me just erase that away. That's 48 still. Just to get that ready. Okay. So to get back to focused. 3 times positive 16 is positive 48. Next, I deal with positive 3 times positive 4m. Positive 3 times positive 4m is positive 12. And do not forget about the m. Okay, next step. There are some terms that I can collect. So let's reorganize. I'm going to do 12m plus 12m. Those are my two terms that I just kind of started out. And then I'm going to do negative 6 plus 48. I've now kind of reorganized. I'm ready to collect. So 12 plus 12 is 24m. And I have negative 6 plus 48. You owe $6. You earn $48. You end up having positive $42. And so that would be your, first you expanded, and then we simplified by collecting like terms. All right, let's see if I can get to the next slide. All right, so in this term, this slide, we can kind of apply, and we're going to use what we've just learned. So in this situation, we are going to find the area, and do not forget, an area of a rectangle is area equals length times width. So I've got a length and a width. So I know that area equals 4x times 2x plus 3. I'm sorry if that doesn't look like a plus, but it's my best attempt. I now going to distribute what is 4 times 2, and that would be 8. And then I know what is x times x, and x times x is x squared. I next do 4 times 3, and 4 times 3 is positive 12. And I do not forget about my x again, so I then add on my x. Finally, it asks me, well, what if x equals 5 centimeters? I'm going to substitute. So I then write 8 bracket 5 squared plus 12 times 5. I know that 5 squared is 25. And then 25 times 8, I bet you, is around 200. I can do that one off the top of my head. And then 12 times 5 is 60, plus 60. And your total answer would be 260 centimeters squared would be the area of that rectangle. Don't worry if I threw you off with the units. We'll talk more about that later. But if you got 260, I'm pretty happy. All right. I hope I'm not clicking along too fast, but this should be a good rate. Let's look at what happens if you're distributing variables. You just got a sneak preview of it. But in this example, we've got our variable out front, and we're going to distribute it inside. Do not forget that when the bases are the same, you add exponents. So what's 1 plus 2? It gets us to 3. And then I go x times negative 3 to get to negative 3x. I believe, oh no, it's not the exact same. Let's look at our first example. What is x times x? It is x squared. What is x times negative 3? Negative 3x. Sorry, it's hard to write with my finger neatly. Let's look. Ooh, and do not forget, I gave you this little hint right here to help you remember about what to do here. That's kind of what was happening in our heads. All right, let's go back over here. Look at this one. All right, do not forget, that's a negative x. So I'm going to do, first we're going to do negative times 7. So what's negative 1 times 7? It's negative 7. Next we deal with the x and the x. So what's x times x? And it would be x squared. Now we take negative, and what's a negative times a negative? A negative times a negative is a positive. And now we deal with our x. We do our x times 4, which would be 4x. Our answer would be negative 7x squared plus 4x. Don't forget to be pausing as we're going if you need to catch up. Let's look at a trickier one. There we go. All right, this one. Don't forget, there's our what we're multiplying by up front, the whole term. Multiply that by that. So let's start out. What is negative 3 times positive 2? What's negative 3 times positive 2? Negative 6. Now we're going to deal with the x times x squared, and don't forget that the exponent on the x is 1. So in my head, I know that 1 plus 2 is 3, so that's 6x to the power of 3. Next round, we're going to do negative 3 times negative 5x. So what's negative 3 times negative 5? A negative times a negative is a positive. 3 times 5 is 15. And x times x is x squared. Finally, last round, times positive 4. So what's a negative times a positive? Sorry, I scribbled there. I should have done that. I'll should use the pointer. There we go. What's a negative times a positive? And hopefully you're all yelling, it's a negative. Yeah, I don't like that color. Let's do that in black. A negative. And then what's 3 times 4? It's 12. And then you have to remember to include your x. All right. Pause it if you need. I'm just going to go into our next example. This one's tricky, so there's a lot going on here. So let's start nice and easy. Let's start with this. So 3m times m is 3m squared. I went 3 times 1 to get to 3, and then I, because the bases are the same, I added my exponents. Next, I do 3m times negative 5. So what's 3 times negative 5? It's negative 15, because a positive times a negative is a negative. And I do not forget about my m. So don't forget about your m. You got to include it in. This round, we're taking a negative and we're distributing it inside. And believe it or not, we've done this before with just a solo negative with no number next to it. So you can use any of the tricks I've taught you. A negative times a positive is a negative 2m squared. And then I see I've got a negative times a negative, which is a positive, and then I add my m. Don't forget to collect your like terms. So I know 3m squared minus 2m squared are like terms, minus 15m plus m. All right, let's collect. What's 3m minus 2m? It's 1m squared. And negative 15 plus m, you owe $15 and you earn $1. It's negative 14m. And if you want to write it really great, you would write it like that as your final simplified answer. I'm not going to worry about the next one because I want to do that one when I'm around. I hope this was helpful. I want to see this in your notebooks and written out, and then use this to help you with your homework. Take care.